Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Today, a lot of interesting things to talk about, so let's jump straight into the map update. So first thing to talk about is some of the rumors that we're hearing. There are rumors, and again, rumors mostly, about the fact that Russians are really wanting to retake Kupiansk, or at least exert some kind of pressure towards Kupiansk. And there have been some probing attacks towards this direction, but nothing serious so far. But it's definitely something to be interested about, because what was happening so far is that Ukrainians slowly and steadily were kind of advancing along this road and capturing the villages that were on the way to get to the Svatovo-Kreminna line, or in this case, for example, this position we know that they want to reach and maybe cut this road down here. Well, apparently now Russians thought that, well, we need to stop Ukrainians somehow. So now, because they're concentrating their efforts maybe around Nizhnya Duvyanka or Svatove, then maybe we can, undercut them from the north somehow, and therefore maybe either retake Kupiansk or at least put it in a position that it cannot serve as a proper feeding like a logistics line. We'll see what's going to happen. I don't expect a lot of things to happen towards Russians, because so far, I gotta say, the mobilized troops have not shown themselves to be as good as a lot of people think they did. But I'm going to talk about it just a little bit later. Beyond that, right now, I know some people were giving me a little bit of a shit for over exaggerating the taking of Kislivka, but I gotta say, it actually was important. I will still stand by it, because it did open a new position of attack towards Nizhnya Duvyanka, and this does help Ukrainians to push further, given not as fast as we would want it so far. And I'm going to talk about it again a little bit later. So we continue hearing that there's happening a lot of fighting around Chervonopopivka and Pishchane and Zhitlivka. As far as we're aware, the situation is constantly shifting there and back. What we can say so far, that these are not red zones, like it's not Russian control zones anymore. These are completely grayed, and Ukrainians are sometimes pushing in, almost taking settlements and then being pushed back and so on. So it's a back and forth play that is happening right now between these three settlements, which is kind of okay for Ukrainians, because it's cutting down the road between Kreminna and Svatove. But obviously, if Ukraine would be able to take these three settlements, this would open a whole new position to maybe semi-encircle Kreminna and then maybe push the Russians out of there, which would be really nice victory over Kreminna to achieve as to start into going into this winter campaign. So situation around Yakovlivka. There has been certain rumors about what was happening here. I'm going to try to show you what I mean. So if you can see, at first was Yakovlivka was supposedly captured. That was the rumors. And now apparently the fightings have been reported on the south side of Yakovlivka. So it's a difficult position to know what's exactly is happening there. And it's tactical things. So I would hope that maybe some other channels that are following the tactical position would delve into explaining into it. But so far we can say that Yakovlivka is definitely a gray zone. Bakhmutske is not even close to being captured. Pidhorny on the approaches to Bakhmut are also not. And this means only one thing, that the Russian plan here, why Yakovlivka is important, is because they want to take Yakovlivka, which would allow to advance towards Soledar, and which would allow the advance from the north towards Bakhmut. That is the plan of the Russians, but so far it's not going well. There has been reports saying that apparently Russians took Yahidne, or it was not just Yahidne, it was Pidhorny. Like Pidhorny I've heard, and I've read Yahidne. Both of those are completely false. Completely false. Russians maybe tried to attack that direction, but whatever they've been reporting is completely is nonsense. Bakhmut is fine. Russians here are in a pretty bad position. We know that the positions of Ukrainians have been reinforced. Some of the forces have been rotated out. So now there is also fresh units inside of Bakhmut. 93rd Brigade, people said 93rd Brigade left Bakhmut. That is not true. We got reports even today of the people from the 93rd Brigade still inside of Bakhmut. So they did not leave. Maybe some of the forward positions shifted to other units, but the 93rd Brigade still stays put. With this said, Bakhmut is fine. So they are defending Bakhmut really well. There have been reports of heavy fighting around Kamenka here. Again, heavy fighting around Vodine. Again, Avdiivka still holds. Russian are really trying. But more and more, it looks like desperate attempts. And we're definitely not going anywhere. Now, around Pavlivka, around here. So the reports are that Ukrainians went on the counterattack around Pavlivka. And apparently they were able to push the Russians a little bit southern. It is not clear what was meant in the report that I read. Was it that they pushed Russians south towards the south end of Pavlivka, or they pushed Russians south of Pavlivka? So bear with me, but it is known that Ukrainians did counterattack on Pavlivka and pushed Russians out a little bit. And then Velika Novosilka. So you might have noticed there was a couple of days where there was not that much Russian losses reported, and then suddenly there's a huge explosions, and we see that there was like one day 24 Russian tanks were lost. This was happening mostly because of the Russian attack towards Velika Novosilka, where they just tried to storm towards the fortified Ukrainian positions with a lot of equipment. I don't know if it was probing attack or what they wanted to do. I think it was something similar they tried to do around Pavlivka, if you remember, like a while back. But a lot of them got pretty badly decimated. Like a lot of casualties, a lot of destroyed equipment. It was pretty brutal for the Russians. And obviously it didn't get as much publicity as what Pavlivka did, but it was still very public in a lot of the places when you follow this. Other than that, we're preparing for some of the standoffs, and right now the biggest news are that Ukrainians are working, mostly Melitopol that is in the news, that there is a bridge have been blown up by the partisan movement, and there is also HIMARS strikes that are ongoing all the way around this Melitopol area for the bases and so on. And this is kind of a precursor to what I'm going to talk about next. So, checking the weather says that in about 7 days, we can expect some of the frost hitting the north side of Ukraine. South side, not so much. Like south side, the temperature still is going to be like -2 to +2, +3. But the north side, indeed, it's going to go to -5, -7. That means that the ground will be able to solidify on the north part. What this might also act, because I've also heard rumors, I already told you that I've not had a lot of contacts from some of my forces on the ground from Ukraine, and this usually happened when there is some kind of deployment, when there's some kind of activities happening. And there also been surfacing here and there videos of Ukrainian columns moving around. Now, I'm not suggesting anything, but we should definitely look out for what's going to happen in the next week or two. Depending, I think, on the weather, but I also think that Ukrainians are also feeling that they need to do something. There was some time for Ukrainians to recoup their strengths and prepare, especially because some of the NATO issue equipment is requiring some maintenance, and Ukrainians really needed that. And now they are preparing to strike again. So I think within the next week or two, we might expect some kind of action. I'm not sure how big, or how precise, or where. This is all questions to General Viktor Zaluzhny. Oh my God, I hope I didn't mispronounce his name. And we're going to see. With that, thank you so much for staying for the map update. I'm going to go into the vlogging section of today's video. People ask me, what if Ukraine does not win the war outright right now with the winter push? What if Ukraine doesn't if it turns out that Ukraine doesn't actually have the resources? Or what if if the push it does not succeed, and then we go into this grinding halt between Ukrainians and Russians. Would the long war mean that Russia just over time will gather all of their resources and win? And the short answer to this is no. Thanks for watching. See you next time. But the longer answer is that we need to get a couple of baseline factors straight. Firstly, obviously, this description and whole discussion is only based that Ukraine doesn't achieve military victory, or there is no internal dispute within Russia that will break apart their chain of command or their desire to fight on. And I'm very comfortable talking about this problem because it then becomes an economic problem and not so much a war problem. It's a problem of management of resources. Because first thing that we need to understand is that the biggest enemy of Russians right now and their war machine that is still bigger than Ukrainian is time. Russia just does not have the time. They don't have the time to build up their army. They don't have the time to prepare their equipment. They don't have the time to essentially gather forces and strike Ukraine again. Ukraine has the momentum, and that's why we're able to discuss about Ukraine actually striking Russia. I think if you would put armies on paper and would put still the Russian number of equipment, number of soldiers, potential for more soldiers and so on, Russian army would still be significantly bigger than Ukrainian army. But the point is, what's the situation on the ground? Because Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. Thank you so much. So someone that commented about it in some of the posts. It's a very good quote. And the same goes with Russia. So they came in with a plan of the quick victory to Ukraine, and they get punched in the mouth. So at that moment, they started trying to adjust it, but Ukraine started gaining power. And now Russia is struggling because whatever they were planning for, all of their plans, they failed. Now they need to re-prepare. Now they need to reassume resources. So one of the arguments is, okay, Russia has bigger manpower capacity. And the argument is yes, but do they have the manpower available right now? And the answer is no. While they can still do the reservists, not the reservists, but the mobilized call-in, they are lacking in training facilities, they're lacking in facilities of processing, and most importantly, they're lacking in equipment for all of these mobilized troops. The performance of the mobilized personnel has shown itself to be absolutely terrible, because what we are getting from the reports is that, for example, around Bakhmut, it's very, very little percentage of the mobilized troops that are actually fighting. A lot of them are actually just the prisoners that are gathering from all across Russia just to use the prisoners as the meat shields, because mobilized troops, a lot of them are coming from jobs and some kind of positions, and they have some kind of standards and they demand those standards. And there is a back and forth between them and their commanders, especially because some of the commanders within these mobilized forces are mobilized themselves. So they have a very uneven ability to fight. This is not the same, for example, for the Wagner group that just gets people that are, for example, they were sentenced for murder. They signed a contract with Wagner. They get outside of the law, complete renegades. And they said, either you go and fight Ukrainians or we're going to shoot you right here, and then no one was going to ask. So it's a complete lawless position that the prisoners are in, but this is how they are able to storm. Once the prisoners are done, it's going to be a very tough position for the Russians. Because mobilized, I don't think that they're going to be very good in advancing. Russia needs time to get their critical mass of troops. They need to get a total advantage, 1 million to 2 million to 1 Ukrainian. Okay, well, maybe 10 to 1 Ukrainians in total. They don't have it. They can mobilize, yes, but we need to understand that Ukraine has also mobilization potential. And the way of attrition of both armies right now does not show a significant difference in forces, that one force can attrition the other force. So we should agree that at that moment, the resource of personnel of both armies will stay the same. The bigger problem is the issue of time and equipment. So Russia can still have produce a lot of tanks. The problem is, while Medvedev can go to all of these factories and say that they will increase production of precise weapons, the problem of they're having is that their personnel doesn't have medical supplies, they don't have living supplies, they don't have cleaning supplies, they don't have anything. They're also having troubles with a lot of vehicles. Ukraine has destroyed a lot of vehicles, and a lot of the vehicles that were used by the Russian Federation are now being sent to refurbishment. And people are saying, yes, Russia has lost 3,000 tanks, but they still have like over 9,000 tanks, of which, for example, they take 3 tanks, and from 3 tanks they can build 1 tank, and then they can send. It's a bad tank, but they can still be sent. The problem is, it all takes time. So getting repairs on the vehicles that comes from the front lines, then also taking tanks from the storage and then refitting 3 tanks into one requires a lot of production, requires refitting capacity. And Russia needs time to build that refitting capacity. Right now, it does not have it. Again, time. So if Ukraine continues their attrition warfare and the equipment that's just going to get churned out, at some point, the capacity of Ukrainians to destroy vehicles is going to be a lot higher than whatever Russia can do. Right now, I've looked at the numbers. If we take the first couple of months, then Ukraine is destroying something around just over 2,000 tanks per year. Tanks, just tanks. I am not completely sure that the Russian refitting and production capacity can sustain 2,000 tanks per year, and even if they put a lot of the effort. So Ukrainian capacity of destroying Russian equipment is huge already, and if we're gonna go into long war, then the Russia will have. And then you ask, well, wouldn't Ukraine get the same problems? And the answer is no, for the obvious reasons that it's being supported by NATO. Right now, there's already discussion about Leopard tanks or other tanks being sent to Ukraine, and I'm not sure if it's going to succeed or not, but the point is the discussion is already ongoing. We already are seeing that there is a desire to get more and more equipment into Ukraine. And while some of that equipment does need refitting, the same as Russians, the West has the capacity to do it. Moreover, there is a lot of investment that is happening in the Western countries right now into the military sector. I've told about this months before, and now it's finally surfaced on the air that it's actually happening. So we definitely know that all of the things are gonna be moving towards the Ukrainian position. So if we agree that the personnel losses, the economy of personnel is not going to change significantly, like even if Russia gets more people, Ukraine can get more people, they have still the capacity to do it. When it comes to the equipment, Ukraine is destroying a lot more Russian equipment that can Russia produce in the coming time, especially when we're talking about in the moment, because time Russia does not have. And if Ukraine will not give Russia time, then at some point, the number of equipment that Russia has will dip below the critical minimum necessary to sustain their position. And at that moment, the Russian army will be done with in Ukraine. Thank you so much for watching. This video came out a little bit too long, but I really wanted to talk about this stuff. I hope you have a great day. Thank you so much to all of the Patreons and supporters. I am going to be doing some kind of charity stream for close to New Year's, and tomorrow and after tomorrow I'm having some of the exams, one at job and one for Danish. So let's hope that it's going to go good. Slava Ukraini, and see you next time.